The supposedly sexy outfit that Bella wears in Twilight is an ankle-length khaki skirt and a long-sleeve blue blouse. Like, come the on, Morgan. Be so for real. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. And today we're talking about Paul and Morgan again because they made this video that is called "It's Time We Talked About What Christians Are Watching," which is just a continued series of videos that are about things that we need to talk about that, like, quite frankly, it seems very confusing that anybody needs to talk about this at all. It's a continuation of something that we've talked about in regards to Girl Defined, with this like policing of your own mind thing. There's a lot of anxiety that seems to be present here in this like fundamentalist group. So we're going to talk about that today. Before we get into it, I want to give you two disclaimers. The first of which is that all of the content on this channel and in this video especially is intended to be broad strokes education and learning. This is not therapy. It can't be therapy. However, there are always links in my description if you want to go find a therapist of your very own. Additionally, all of the content that we make on this channel about religious fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism, religious radicalism generally is about that specifically. This is not about regular religion. I don't give a hoot what you do with your own religion in your own life. We actually have research to support that it can be beneficial if you're involved with a religion that's safe and validating for you. So this is about, again, fundamentalism, religious Christian, evangelical Christianity, whatever. So let's get into this video.
Morgan was out of town last week. Or a week ago, and I'm on the couch. The Witcher pops up. I'm looking for something to watch, and I'm like, ooh, I watched just like the little trailer
type thing.
Yeah, when like you just hold your cursor over it and it like comes, and I'm like, man, this looks like a fun show. So I go to Parents Guide, and it has like sex and nudity section, and it said severe. I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. I'm not.
Okay, wow. There is so much that's being said here without being said explicitly. I wanted to address this first of all because there's been a lot of discussion about people like Paul and Morgan and Girl Defined and people in this evangelical Christian fundamentalist niche in regards to how childlike they appear. And I feel like this is a great opportunity for us to discuss the ways that that manifests in people's everyday behavior. And this to me is very much that. Feeling the need to have approval by some kind of like review body or like outside source in order to feel allowed to do things as an adult is very much a function of these very repressive and very authoritarian religious groups generally. Honestly, this is a red flag, to be super clear. If you're at all involved in a religion, a community, a club, a group, whatever, that tells you that you need to have explicit approval in order to be deemed a good person or be doing the right thing, red flag, especially in this way where we're like hyper analyzing the minutia of people's behaviors and their everyday lives. This is very restrictive. This also breeds a lot of anxiety and fear. We talked about this with the Girl Defined video where it seems like the fear honestly is like of their own minds, their own thoughts and feelings. They're genuinely afraid of those things because they view them as sinful. This is so fucking harmful. It can't be understated how detrimental this can be to somebody's sense of self, their self-efficacy, but also just like their mood and ability to function generally. One of the things that's really important for us to acknowledge and validate about chronic anxiety is how much it permeates into our everyday lives, and religions and environments like this that prescribe that anxiety really get under my fucking skin because, again, the effects of this can't be understated. It's a really, really difficult thing for people to heal from. This is a very common thing for people to walk through in deconstruction, and so it just pisses me the fuck off that Paul and Morgan are prescribing this to people as like a beacon of morality when actually all it is inflicting suffering on people for the purpose of gaining approval from some proverbial audience, which is just wholly unhealthy. Okay, before we get any deeper in the video, I do want to pause and say thank you to this week's sponsor, which is Vegucated. I am so excited to partner with them again because we have partnered with them in the past and had a great time. For those of you who don't know, Vegucated is an online platform dedicated to sexual learning. It's a wonderfully safe and inclusive space, and I really have enjoyed the courses that they have. They have over 100 courses on everything sex and intimacy and relationship related. And my favorite part about Vegucated is that unlike a lot of the other advice that exists on the internet about sex and intimacy, it's evidence-based and it's safe and it's inclusive. inclusive. One of the reasons that I love Beducated so much is that there really genuinely is a course for everybody on this platform. You guys may or may not know that Erin and I are polyamorous, and so we have done a lot of learning and a lot of adjusting in our ability to show up effectively for ourselves and for each other and for the folks that we are in other relationships with. And we watched a course together about navigating non-monogamy that was so wonderful and helpful. And the other thing that I love about Beducated so much is that the advice is actually actionable. There's not like vague platitudes about like, just try harder, just be more confident. There's actually useful reflection questions, there's conversation starters, there's soothing techniques, there's lots of really useful skills to be had in the relationship courses, but also in the sex and intimacy courses. If it's not clear already, I'm genuinely just a fangirl of Beducated, and so I would love to share the wealth of that with y'all. Beducated has been so kind as to give me a coupon code for all of my followers. You can get 50% off the yearly pass with the coupon code Mickey Atkins, only in August though. So at the time this video goes up, you have a couple of days left. So go click the link in the description, use my code Mickey Atkins to get 50% off. And then after that, you can get 40% off your yearly pass. Beducated also has a 1-day free trial with a 14-day money-back guarantee, so you genuinely have nothing to lose. And like I said, I really love Beducated, and I think you will really love it too. So go click the link, show Beducated some love for showing me some love, and thank you again, Beducated, for sponsoring this week's video. So let's go ahead and hop back in.
Touching it with a 9-foot pole, I would be, how do I put this nicely? An idiot. to put myself.
I'm not calling you an idiot, whoever's watching it.
Dana, I'm not, but to put as a male that knows, like, I have to be on guard, and I posted about this. I actually was on, that may have been something that inspired my Instagram post, but I'm just like, these Christian men that know that sexuality, and they battle with the mind, and they battle with PORN, and then they're so casual about what they watch. And this goes for women too that battle it. Women battle it. It's hard for me to comprehend, really. Mm-hmm. And so
I think there are lots of things that are hard for Paul to comprehend, but that doesn't mean he should make himself an authority in giving advice to other people about them. Listen, I want to be super clear about this. The language that they're using here, in my opinion, is not an accident. Describing experiencing sexual arousal as a battle with your mind comes with the territory when we talk about this culture. This is why I make the distinction in every video about the difference between regular Christian religion or religion generally and what Paul and Morgan and Girl Defined and all these people practice, because it is entirely possible to be a religious person without prescribing this attitude of like inner conflict, or like to say that this amount of inner conflict and this amount of inner turmoil is not only normal but is also virtuous. Like this goes so far beyond what is healthy, and we're like really tiptoeing into spiritual abuse territory at this point, because insinuating that folks who struggle with sexuality, who are battling their own sexuality, are dumb for watching regular media, first of all, is incredibly hurtful and hateful, but also is a symptom of this culture. I think it's important to talk about, because there is a general through line in regards to restriction as like a phenomenon. This happens a lot with diet culture. It's very, very prevalent in that arena, but this also happens in other places. A lot of times when we are unlearning this very restrictive attitude about food, for example, the thing that will come up for us over and over again, and for folks, especially in like practicing intuitive eating, for example, the phrase that folks use all the time is like, oh, no, I could never have that food in my house, because if I do, I'll eat all of it in one night, right? And like, where does that come from? The important reflection there is in honoring that the reason that that is happening is because we have lived our lives up to this point with this very heavy attitude of restriction around particular subjects. This again spans the gamut in terms of like behavior and like social phenomenon. So if it's eating for you, it could also be consuming or viewing sexual or romantically charged material. But this attitude of restriction does the same thing in both of these places, which is that it creates an attitude of scarcity and specialness around this particular thing, which causes our brain to want it more. The example that I commonly use for folks when we are talking about unlearning restriction is about Halloween candy for little kids. It's very, very common for folks to say, as a parent, I only allow my kid to have one piece of candy on Halloween night, and then they can have one piece of candy every day thereafter, and that's it. Like no overload of sugar for you. And what that communicates to your child is that, first of all, sugar is a commodity. Candy is a thing that is like, ooh, super special. It's very interesting. It's very exciting because it's this restricted thing, right? It's sort of behind this proverbial wall, and that makes it interesting. Ooh, special, cool, right? But along with that, it also communicates that they can't trust their own intuition in terms of moderating their intake of a specific thing. This is the same thing that we talk about grown adults having to moderate their contact with particular types of media, because this culture and this religion creates this attitude of scarcity and specialness and like forbiddenness around sex and intimacy and viewing those things. And so it becomes the object of obsession for a lot of people. I want to be clear. I want to pause here real quick and just be super clear that addiction and pathological presentations, what is the word I'm looking for? Manifestations. This manifesting in a pathological way is entirely possible. That does happen to people. The research about that is somewhat contentious. I would encourage people to use a discerning eye, just like consume information like that with a grain of salt, especially because in these very restrictive evangelical fundamentalist environments, it's common for any amount of sexual arousal, interest, especially adultery, to get blamed on a porn addiction. The reality is that oftentimes that's not really what's at play in these cultures. But anyways, neither here nor there. The point that I'm making is that having to exercise this attitude of like really heavy restriction around a thing, otherwise we'll go bananas, is a function of this culture. The truth is that when we unlearn this attitude of restriction and we tell ourselves, yes, this thing is just a normal thing, right? Watching a TV show with a sex scene in it or eating Halloween candy is just a thing. Right? It's just a human thing. It's not inherently special or interesting. It doesn't have to be some kind of forbidden or fancy thing. Oftentimes what will happen if we've existed in a period of heavy restriction is that we will binge on the thing. That's entirely human and very normal. But over time, as we begin to develop those self-regulatory skills and as we develop the ability to look within and ask ourselves, like, what actually is my threshold here? What actually is my want or need here? Things will stabilize. What happens when you give a small child a big giant bag of candy on Halloween is that the first time they're probably going to eat themselves sick. They'll feel really bad. And then that turns into eventually a skill to say, I know that if I eat more than like 3 pieces of candy in one sitting, I'm probably going to get a bellyache. I might have diarrhea. I might need to puke later. I don't know. I'm probably not going to want to eat any other food, or I might get a headache. Generally, I just don't like the way that that feels in my body, right? This is an important skill for people to have. And when people grow up in cultures like this that repress any expression of sex and intimacy, it creates this obsession. And I think it's not a coincidence that people like Paul and Morgan and Bethy and like Girl Defined generally, I guess, have made their entire careers out of talking endlessly about sex in ways that, for what it's worth, are particularly immodest on the internet. But this, again, this is a function of this culture. This is by design because we've safeguarded this thing behind a wall. People become obsessed with it. And I think this is just a feature of that. For what it's worth, feeling so aroused and so overwhelmed with lust or like sexual inclination, arousal, while you're watching a TV show that has a pretty, all things said, mild sex scene in it, that warrants further introspection about what's going on with me. What parts of myself are needing attention? What parts of myself are needing some unpacking, some further evaluation? Because me responding to this material in this way may not be particularly helpful to me, but also potentially not normative. So
for me to sit through a show like The Witcher, even though I really like the premise of it, and watch a show that has severe sex and nudity, that would be very foolish.
Yeah, even if you fast forward it, honestly.
And lack of discernment.
Because you just never know. These things can just pop up, and then you've got that 2 to 5 second clip of sexual stuff.
I don't want that stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
Why? Okay, so this is the other thing about this that really grinds my fucking gears, is that this turns into rape culture really quickly. This attitude that, oh my goodness, you couldn't expect men to control themselves when they're seeing a little bit of tasteful side boob on TV. Men are just wild animals. This very quickly turns into the, if you are dressed immodestly, it's your fault when you're sexually assaulted thing, right? Which is, for what it's worth, rampant in this culture. I think it goes without saying that that's, first of all, disgusting and not true, but also a fucking problem. Like, prescribing this belief to people as if it's normal is so incredibly harmful. And also, no, it's not. No, the fuck it is not. Again, it is entirely morally neutral for people to be in different places with unlearning this attitude of restriction, and especially for folks in deconstruction. It's common, I would say, to go through a phase where there is a fixation or there is an obsession with material that was previously blacklisted in your life. And I would encourage people to exercise an attitude of self-compassion, non-judgmentalism about that. Obviously, it's important to honor like time and place and, consent and situational barriers and things like that. But it is entirely common for people to go through this phase, again, where we're finding equilibrium. There'll be peaks and valleys before we level things out to a normal place. But this attitude is just wild to me, that Paul is like with his full chest basically saying, I literally will explode if I sit and watch some side boob while viewing The Witcher, and that footage will live rent-free in my head forever, I guess in theory, and that will haunt him. Yeah, there's a lot that's being said here again that's not being said out loud, and it's just... Oops. It's just a little concerning to me.
There's some gray area if there's a show that's, it says maybe like mild, and you can look and see, okay, mild, there was this and this, I can stay away from that. But anything severe, it's going to be a raunch fest. Yeah. It's going to be a raunch fest.
If you have...
Honestly, this sounds really fun. I want a t-shirt that says Raunch Fest. On top of that, I want to address that Paul and Morgan are doing the thing again where they say, this is true in my life, and so therefore it must be and will always be true in everyone else's life. And that's not fucking true. That's not how the human experience works, Paul. I can speak to that pretty clearly as someone who has 2 degrees and thousands of hours helping people unpack trauma and work through human behavior and behavioral issues and emotions and things like that. I can assure you that while, yes, I think it's probably true, common, that a lot of us have shared experiences that we're afraid to talk about. This attitude that like the way that I think, feel, view the world is a universal experience is not actually true. And again, we talked about this with the Bethy video, but I feel like this is an important disclaimer to make here also. Anybody who is a good educator, anybody who has any amount of credentials or leg to stand on as an expert in any field will never fucking tell you this. No one who's a good educator says, well, in my experience, therefore it must also be yours, because the subsection 0 number 1 headline in all of the how to be a good educator courses and handbooks and whatever is to leave your personal opinions at the door, in the sense that you need to be open to honoring what other people's life experiences and feelings and thoughts and opinions are. That's how we effectively educate and help people make transformative change in their life, is by honoring what's actually true in their life rather than trying to force our life onto them.
Struggled with, and this is not you specifically, Dana, just anyone, if you have struggled with lust, any type of sexual immorality, anytime recently or even within the past few years, why are we watching TV shows that have sex scenes in them? Even if they don't show everything, why are we watching movies that romanticize and go crazy? Even Twilight. I watched that recently and remembered, wow, this gets steamy. It was oh my goodness.
Twilight was written by a Mormon, you guys. The supposedly sexy outfit that Bella wears in Twilight is an ankle-length khaki skirt and a long-sleeve blue blouse. Come the fuck on, Morgan. Be so for real. Ugh. On top of that, why does it matter? Why does it matter to Paul and Morgan what other people are doing with their lives? Even if it is in their culture being viewed as unholy or sinful or whatever, what's it to you? It doesn't matter.
I would say that would be, I'm sorry for cutting you off. I would say that would be a gray area one. You can watch that and,
yes,
but
I'm so glad that Paul is here to dictate for us what's a gray area and what's allowed.
If it's you fall into the category of who Morgan's describing and that's a big struggle for you and you find yourself slipping into it, why would you put yourself through that?
It's guys, it's worth the sacrifice of not watching Twilight. It's worth the sacrifice of not listening to these songs that over-sexualize and over-romanticize love, which is that love when you're falling into sin? No. And it's just worth it. If it's gonna keep you out of falling into sin, don't do it.
Let us know.
Okay, First of all, again, this is just wildly prescriptive and finger pointy, and it's just very interesting to me. But on top of that, I want to address this attitude that they have. They've said this before. To my understanding, there's a Bible verse about fleeing sexual immorality, and their opinion or stance is very much that any material that has the potential to lead you to sin, you should literally run away from, run as far away from that as you can. And I want to talk about this because I think for a lot of people who struggle with chronic anxiety, this can also come up with OCD and other anxiety related disorders. This is a pretty normal or common human instinct to run away from the things that provoke fear or anxiety in us. And I think it's important to humanize that. However, clinically what we know for some people, not in all cases, but for some people, about unlearning and taking back our autonomy, our control, our power, in regards to living with anxiety is about confronting the things that create fear and anxiety. Now, don't misunderstand me. Don't fucking come in my comments leveling accusations at me. I want to be super clear. There is a time and a place, and it's also important for this work to be guided, ideally, by a licensed credentialed clinician. But what we know is that intentionally avoiding material that provokes this really severe anxiety in us can actually make the anxiety work worse. So developing skills about how to confront these anxieties, how to be aware of how our body responds, how to self-soothe, how to regulate our nervous system in front of those things can, first of all, be a really integral skill in you getting your fucking life back and you learning how to like function and feel okay and not feel like there's danger around every corner, but also be really important in helping us to bring the anxiety back to a level that's like more functional. This is not a video about anxiety or how anxiety works. I could talk about it all day, but to make things as succinct as possible, anxiety is not something that from a clinical perspective we're trying to eradicate from someone's life. Anxiety serves an actually important purpose in helping to keep us safe, helping to form patterns that are, it's intended to keep us safe. It's a whole thing. Anyways, the goal is not to eradicate anxiety from your existence completely, because that is sometimes the function by which you avoid things that could be potentially either emotionally, physically, or spiritually or socially dangerous to you, right? I don't know why the words are not coming out of my mouth today. The work in addressing clinical anxiety or chronic anxiety rather is in figuring out how to deal with it, how to address it in your daily life and not feel like the anxiety is sitting in the driver's seat. This is the phrase that I use with my clients all the time, is that it's perfectly human and shame-free to have anxiety, to feel anxious about things, but ideally we're operating from this place where we can recognize that anxiety is sitting in my passenger seat, maybe in my back seat, and yes, while I want to make safety-oriented and conscientious decisions, I'm not allowing the anxiety to sit in the driver's seat and just yank my fucking steering wheel around, because it's very overwhelming and it's also not fair to you, right? But this is like exactly what Paul and Morgan prescribe. Basically, sit your anxiety in the driver's seat, let it yank that steering wheel all around and like own control over your life. And that's not healthy. That's not healthy. That's not okay. And this is why we shouldn't be taking advice about mental health topics from people who don't have a college degree to rub together between the two of them.
You guys in the comments, like what kind of are some shows that you're watching that you feel like I, as a Christian, in good conscience can watch this show? I can watch maybe a movie. Like, I really like this movie. I could watch that. Let us know some things, but I will even go as far as to say Oppenheimer. I know there are going to be people who will watch this that watched Oppenheimer. I was super excited to see it. Christopher Nolan's newest film. He's a great director. I consider myself a little bit of a film critic myself. I like to dissect it and so forth. And then I saw that it was not just, one sex scene that you could kind of fast forward. It was like there was a 5-minute dialogue where she's without clothes on and you can see stuff.
Oh, no.
So I passed on it. I will say we were discussing it with our friends, and I have a really close friend who he took it very seriously. He got on Common Sense Media or one of those places, and I think he literally Googled, like, can you watch Oppenheimer and not see nudity? And it
Okay, but this is what I'm talking about. These people exist in a cage. Like, their whole life is you're only allowed to live your life so long as you're moving within this like 4 foot by 4 foot cage, and you can't stray beyond that. Otherwise, eternal damnation.
They should have saw the Barbie movie.
They did, and they hated it.
Oh.
Paul was very threatened.
There's no nudity in the Barbie movie.
Yes, but feminism.
Oh, that's scarier than sex.
Yeah, to Paul is. I just really feel compelled to call attention to how restrictive this is, because they also do this thing where they talk endlessly about the freedom and the peace and the hope and the joy that their religious orientation will offer you, and in the same breath tell you, you can't watch this movie, you can't watch this TV show, you're not allowed to listen to this music, don't go to this place, don't shop at this place, don't do this, don't do that, don't think this way, don't feel that way. That's not actual freedom. I think it's just very important to honor that it's entirely possible for people to be belonging to religions of all number of orientations and cultural contexts and whatever, and also experience a level of freedom, not experience the really heightened level of anxiety that all of these people seem to be experiencing all of the fucking time, and for religion to add positive value into your life. The way that these people speak about religion, we talked about this before, but the way that these people speak about religion is the way that a lot of people describe abusive relationships, in saying like, well, if I had just stayed within the confines of what I was supposed to do, then nothing bad would have happened to me. Like, that's not healthy. That's not healthy.
Like, spelled it out for him. Here's what you got to do. When this person comes up on the screen, literally just look away, and it can be done. I'm not wanting to put myself through that. It just like all those hoops, but he said it can be done. I'm on here to just encourage you guys, again, like what Morgan already shared. If this is something you really struggle with, I would say really anyone, honestly. But if it's something that you know, like, I'm in a battle here.
But the desk is over here.
Better help.
And so
This is one of those things where Satan can really try to get to me and does get to me. Why put yourself through it?
Don't do it.
I see some of you guys are jumping in. Let's go, Paul. Thank you, Archon. I appreciate it. Dana, you said you watch it with your hubby. I would have a very real conversation with your hubby and just ask him, like, hey, like, you know, is this stuff get to you? Like, does it mess with you? How are you doing in this area?
But she did say that they skip past the no parts.
Maddie says, I like Game of Thrones, and even as someone non-religious, the sex scenes get on my nerves. Well, you get a little bit of a pass. I'm not saying you get a total pass, Maddie, but we're going to hold fellow Christians to a higher standard than non-Christians. Switchfoot Star says, I agree, Paul. Kayla, Matthew 26:41, watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I think if we were more honest with ourselves, so many of us do have very weak fleshes.
Okay, I want to talk about this. There's only a couple of minutes left, and I think they're just reading comments, so we'll probably wrap it up after this. But this is one of the other things that I felt compelled to address here, because they do this a lot, where they talk about how important it is to follow the rules and figure out what the rules are and then never stray from them and whatever. And I just really want to highlight how restrictive and also like not feasible this is for just like everyday life. But on top of that, how this adds up to a greater picture of a culture that lords control over its participants with an iron fist. I do think that it's worth noting that within this culture, there are quite a few people, women in particular, and other marginalized identities who are disadvantaged, right? Their opinions, their autonomy, their feelings disregarded in its entirety sometimes. And so there is a very real and very dangerous power dynamic, or differential rather, that exists in these communities that sometimes leads to abuse. This is really important for us to talk about alongside of this very restrictive and rule-oriented perspective about life, because this attitude that like you have to follow the rules, you have to do it correctly, really lends itself to people not doing any introspection about like what actually feels true to me, what actually feels safe for me, and rather just taking at face value the authoritative or authoritarian things that your husband or your pastor or whoever is telling you to do, right? This creates an environment that is rife for abuse generally, but especially spiritual and intimate partner violence. I just really want to encourage people to remember that environments like this, religions like this, groups like this, if their very survival is dependent on you completely abandoning any sense of intuition or self-determination or autonomy, this is a problem. That group is probably more than likely a toxic place to be and not a safe place for you to be. No group, religion, club, community, family should be dependent on you not getting to express your very humanhood in order for it to continue existing. This is like so incredibly toxic and abusive. Okay, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that Paul and Morgan are continuing to make the most rancid content, and I'm not a fan of it. I do want to give a shout out though, for those of you who are in deconstruction and working through this stuff, please know that that finding your own sense of stability and safety and autonomy is going to take time. It's very confusing. It can feel really overwhelming, but it is very much work that you can do. And when you get to the other side of that, or you've made some meaningful progress on that, the feeling of like, I made this life for myself and I know what the fuck I'm about. I know what I stand for, and nobody gets to take that away from me is absolutely unparalleled. There is very much a sense of relief and peace and joy and stability waiting for you on the other side if you have the resources to continue doing that unpacking. So big love to you if you're in the middle of that, because it's difficult. As always, I do want to remind people, please don't go and hate watch their content. Don't go interact with their content. It only gives them a further leg to stand on with things like sponsorships and continuing to make content like this. So there's lots of places that you can talk about and or snark on content like this that don't give them a digital thumbs up. And also another shout out to our sponsor this week, Beducated. Thank you so much for sponsoring this week's video. If you want to end your summer with a bang, go click the link in my description. You can get 50% off of an annual pass until the end of August. So go do that. Love you, Beducated. Thank you so much. Love you all the most for being here. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We talk about stuff like this, but also a cute pop culture moment every now and again. So I'd love to have you stay for that. And then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.
We did it!
We did it!